Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another week at the Better Events podcast. We are going to have a really hearty discussion today. We are going to be talking about the ethics of events. We're going to talk about navigating tough situations, how you would handle them, how we would handle them. And this is actually going to be a really intriguing conversation. So we invite you to stick around and take a listen, and let's go ahead and get into it.
Welcome to the Better Events Podcast. Join two event strategists, Logan Clements and Mary Davidson, who believe we can all create, host, and attend better events. In this podcast, you will learn about event strategy and actions that you can use today as an event host, planner, or manager. Hear directly from the people who are creating innovative and inspiring events today and tomorrow, and grow your business along the way. Now, let's get started, and thanks for listening to the Better Events Podcast.
Hi, friend. Welcome back to another episode of the Better Events Podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Logan Clements, and I'm joined by fellow co-host Mary Davidson. And before we get into our juicy topic this week about ethics and events, we are going to do our conversation starter, which, Mary, I have the question for you this week. What's a small luxury you've treated yourself to recently that made a big difference in, it could be your week, your day, your month, or your season?
This is going to be a silly answer, but it's the first thing that came to my head, and I think it's true. So we have a movie theater in my city that's like really old. They haven't updated it, but it's convenient because it's so close. It's also not something people love to go to because it's not nice. And so like if you want to go to a movie premiere, you never have to buy your tickets ahead, blah, blah, blah. But I decided to treat myself and to go to the theater that was 25 minutes away where you get the recliner seats, which I know most movie theaters have it, but near me, you got to drive. And it's the stupidest thing, but that's what popped in my head. And it did feel like a luxury to just sit back, put your feet up, and enjoy a movie, which I hadn't done in a while. And so I think it was worth the effort. So that's my answer. Logan, what about you? What's your small luxury?
Yeah, no, I we love a good movie, especially if they can replicate almost what it's like at home, but with all the benefits of the really big screen and everything. I think that is a great one. Mine is we finally bit the bullet and got an AC unit for our bedroom in Seattle because most places, if you're a listener not familiar with Seattle, a lot of places don't have air conditioning because it used to be cool enough that you would not need it. And we live in an older apartment building that does not have AC. And from my summer of softball, I was in a lot of press boxes where I was working out of a room that didn't have AC. And so our ops team was amazing and got us some floor base units that had a tube that went out the window, which I'd seen, but never like experienced. And one of them was so impressive. I sent a picture of it to my partner and said, let's figure out where we can buy one of these. And we did. And it has just made both of us sleep quite hot. And so while I can deal without AC during the day, at night and being cool, it has been so luxurious and something I'm kicking myself we didn't do earlier.
I honestly love that answer, especially because it's been getting hot in Seattle lately. So about time. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
it's been really nice, and we are pretty good and don't like run it when we're not home and stuff. But it has just made going to sleep so much more enjoyable.
Oh, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. Those are great luxuries. And listeners, hopefully you can find a way to treat yourself to some little luxury just to either reward yourself or just celebrate life for whatever reason. And one of those things that you could do to celebrate life is to come to the 2025 Better Events Conference, which is coming up on Wednesday, October 1st, virtually, and Thursday, December 18th, in person. The link is in the show notes, but you can also just go to bettereventspod.com/conference to get your tickets. So don't forget about that. Now, as we transition into our topic for today, we are talking about the ethics of events. So, this is going to be a discussion about navigating tough situations as an event professional. And we chose this topic because, well, this is something that we put on the list of content a little while ago. And I was trying to remember why I put it on the list of content a while ago. But ethics for me are something that I am interested in. I went to like a session once about the ethics of like business, and it made me think about whatever industry you are in your career, there are ethical things that happen that you have to decide, is this right or wrong, and what am I going to do about it? Sometimes it's personal, and sometimes it's more just like, as a profession, are we doing this the way it should, or what you think is right should be done. And so I couldn't stop thinking about it, especially after some on-site experiences at recent events. And so I'm excited for this conversation. Logan, how are you feeling? You excited?
Let's do it. Let's jump in.
Awesome. All right. So we're going to start just with a discussion and then get into some dilemmas and scenarios. So listeners, as you are listening to this, please, judge us appropriately and also think of your responses and how you might deal with some of these situations. So Logan, how do you define ethics in the context of event planning and production?
Well, I will stall, Mary, while you Google the definition of ethics and events because I know you love to look it up. So I can't wait to get fact checked. For me, when I was thinking about this topic of how I would define ethics, I mean, it's kind of like, to me, ethics is like the balance of right and wrong. And while that can feel very black and white and crystal clear exactly what's right and exactly what's wrong, I think event planning pulls us into a lot of different situations based on the stakeholders. So something that is right for you as the event host might not be necessarily the right answer for your guests, but we are in the hospitality business. And so that's one where I would always say, like, ethics is you want to make sure that you're having, a safe environment and experience for your attendees. And I would count your staff in that as well. And that's when I was trying to think about negative impacts where I feel like ethics have been thrown out the window. It's usually because something has either been unsafe or something is like deeply unfair and not meeting one of our basic needs as humans of, food, safety, and all of that. But Mary, how'd I do? What does Google say?
You did great. And Google says what you said, but more so as it does. So I will read the definition because it just sends the point home further. So it says, in event planning and production, ethics refers to the principles, values, and standards that guide decision making and professional conduct to ensure events are planned and executed with integrity, fairness, and respect for all stakeholders. Which yes,
Not,
that's what it is.
yeah, we're not going to argue with Google on that one.
No, sounds like a hit. But to give some examples, just to kind of, if you're listening to this and you're still trying to get what we're talking about today, it talks about honesty and transparency, fairness, safety, like you said, confidentiality, sustainability, which is interesting, respect, and accountability. So there you go, a little additional stuff there.
Yeah, obviously Google is going to be a little more robust than I am, but we should also clarify neither Mary nor I are law professors or lawyers, and so again, our interpretation is more as the working person dealing with this. But Mary, kind of again, another broad question here: what is so important for why is it important for event professionals to think about ethics proactively and not just when something goes wrong?
Yeah, well, this is interesting because we've shared this on the podcast all the time that it does feel like our industry doesn't have a lot of standards. It depends, as you get really into certain things, yes, there are standards. There's even like unions under certain parts of the industry. But in general, we're kind of just like figuring it out as we go because it doesn't feel like there's a standard. So with that in mind, I think it's important for event professionals to think about ethics proactively because that's our job. Our job is to be able to deal with issues when they arise. And some of those issues are ethical issues that pop up. So, as we do in any part of the event planning process, we think through the things that can go wrong. I think this could be part of contingency planning or just knowing your event well enough that you can handle any situation that comes up. And ethics is a part of that.
I would just add to that, like, I think any post-mortem or post-event debrief you do and any really large glaring issues that come up, a lot of them would trace back to something that you probably could have gotten ahead of. And again, like we talk about, I think just of ethics and primarily safety and security, like there's certain things that you're like, whoo, we might have dodged a bullet. Like that could have been a way worse situation if, 100 more people were involved of this one person falling or something. Like, and there's certain, I think it's a good lens to look at your event plans through and make sure that it's fitting. And then personally, I will say I've had a couple projects that I'll feel like I have this weird kind of just like feeling in my gut. And it's something I can't figure out where I'm like, I'm excited to be here, but I'm not I'm not fully wholeheartedly into it. And usually I have to get away from an event, post event, have some time away to like finally figure out what was bothering me. And sometimes it is, and I don't really use the word ethics. I think I use the word values more often, but it's like the client or the team I was working with. And again, so much of how I'm approaching events these days has been, I love the people. The people are why I do the things. And so if my values and somebody else's values don't align, that's where I can kind of feel some of that friction. And sometimes it's even very small, but other times it's even larger. And that has been a factor of why I do or do not go back to certain events or work with certain people again. Because I kind of am working to trust my gut because I found I can push through it, But afterward, it's like, oh, I don't feel as satisfied as I normally do at this event. And sometimes it comes down to a values or an ethics issue.
I love that you mentioned the gut check. I think that's a really good way to gauge if you feel like something is aligning with your values or ethics at that time.
Hey y'all, Sean Walker with Audio Engineers Northwest here. This month's quick tip: why do microphones come in packs of 4? Well, the answer is they actually come in singles, duals, and quad kits. The nice ones come in packs of 4, and we use those because they have the best sound, the least interference, and they're the most agile, so we can put as many channels into a small space as possible. You can get them in singles for like a breakout or something, but those are the like entry to mid-level kind of guys. Hope that helps.
And without further ado, let's get back to the episode.
So let's get into some dilemmas. And so listeners, this question is for you and Logan. I'm going to ask you this one first. So how would you handle a situation when you're asked to inflate or hide parts of the budget?
So this one I feel like is a very common situation because a lot of times what we do with, with events is you got to have contingencies in there. You need to have your markup. I mean, it's how a lot of businesses make money. This is one where, again, I will always default to the pattern of who hires me. So when I work for a larger agency, again, it's a part of their business model is to mark up services. So let's say the vendor costs $3,000 on the budget. They want to put 4 because they need $1,000, not just to pocket it, but more as like that's to cover managing that person. So I don't feel as very strongly about it, but you will, and Mary's seen this on projects like I work. If you hire me directly as Logan and Logan Strategy Group, and it's my team, we are charging you almost everything's going to be at what it cost. And I've even gotten in kind of debates with my accountant because there is the cost, as she says, of money being paid today and not getting paid back until 2 months from now. And so there are certain things like travel fees and things that I've started to put a slight markup on for that reason of just knowing I'm paying now and getting paid back months from now. So I'm coming to terms with it, but I will say I was very uncomfortable at the start. And then I think as long as I can rationalize it's a service fee, it's a business model, and it's not just something that like, oh, the client doesn't know, like it should only be 2. I think big markups to me, like when you're charging like 4 times the price or 3 times the price, to me, that's when I start to feel just uncomfortable. And again, that could be something that in the moment, often I don't have the power to necessarily say no there, but it could be a reason why I wouldn't work with another client. Because one of my values is transparency. And I love getting to be transparent with clients about, if not exactly what it is, but like roughly, give or take 10% accurate to what something would cost. How about you, Mary? What would you add?
Yeah, one of our values is also transparency. So Logan, thanks for being so transparent. Appreciate it. I love everything you said. Also thinking of other budgets and things like that. One of the line items that always like is a little bit of a red flag to me, like anything you said, yes. Miscellaneous, that line item drives me nuts because one, it's like, well, what is it? And I think there should be a miscellaneous line item, just like some contingency. And I'm thinking, I'm talking about really like an event budget that lists, all like the venue expenses and all of those things, and then a miscellaneous line item. If that miscellaneous line item is like thousands of dollars, I just feel like the money isn't being like cared for appropriately, honestly. So that's something that I'm always like red flag a little bit, makes me like uncomfortable. I want to know why. Because we want to be as accurate as possible also in our budgets. So that's part of it. And then the other thing, budget related, this is kind of like a side story, but it's an example that I think might be helpful, is with fundraising events. One of the dilemmas is, do you report how much money you actually made after an event? So after all of your expenses, like what is the actual net profit of the event? And a lot of nonprofits report that gross number, we raised $1 million, but after expenses, we really only raised $300,000. And that's fine. It's more about the story that you're going to paint. But it is another question, like what's the ethical amount to say that you actually raised that's actually going to directly to the needs and the mission? Because a lot of it's going to cover the expenses.
And that one's a sticky one too, because I think a lot of it, the rationale there, especially on the nonprofit side, is the optics, right? A lot of people don't know just how expensive events are. Unless you are a listener who has planned a wedding, planned your own wedding or as a wedding planner, you know that certain things you're like, and those in the event industry for our events, it's like, we know when you're throwing a huge gala with donors that are willing to throw around a lot of money, you often are spending a lot of money on a nice dinner and nice drinks and multiple bars. So they don't have to ever wait for a drink, you know, like lots of things that add up. And so, yeah, it's just an interesting one. There's no right answer, I would say. And I know there's certain folks out there that are willing to do and kind of, put some of their ethics aside just to get the gig or do the work. And that, again, is a personal choice for everybody based on kind of what they're doing and, where you are financially. So again, no judgment either way, but just always a good gauge. Mary, this next ethical dilemma, what's the line between a good working relationship with a vendor and favoritism or conflicts of interests? Like if you're going to recommend one vendor over another.
Yeah, this is a good question. I'm finally getting to the point where we're working with vendors again and again so I can start building kind of like a preferred list for myself. Like, who do I like to work with? And then when we go in and work with a client or a venue, they usually have everybody has their own preferred lists. So, what do you do in this situation? I appreciate when clients have somebody they want to work with, but they're also willing for recommendations. The sticky situation is when I start working with a client and they recommend a vendor that I would prefer not to work with. And then I'm like, okay, so would you be willing for multiple quotes? And so I feel like that's one way to kind of deal with the situation is like, yes, you have this person that's your favorite. I have this person that's my favorite. Can we just get like 2 or 3 quotes and you can decide what you think is best, but at least we're like opening it up to potential options. So that's one thing that I think about this. Also, this kind of ties back into budget, but I had a recent example where we were getting bids for an event and one of the vendors just underbid everyone by a ton, by like $30,000 underbid people. Like you cannot compete with that vendor. And it was frustrating to me because I was like, from a business perspective, how are you making money on this event? And we can't compete with that. And we don't want to work with you. And so we have to because that it just comes down to the money, unfortunately. And so I was frustrated on their business practice because I don't feel like they were charging fairly and we weren't able to even like consider any other bids except for theirs. So that was frustrating to me, but it has to do with like the vendor themselves. So those are my answers. Logan, what about you? What would you add about working relationship with vendors and favoritism?
Yeah, I think for me, again, back to transparency, it just comes out to, I think for this, I would love if it was industry standard for people to divulge or, disclose that they are getting a referral fee. Because I do know that that is a common practice in the event industry is you go like, hey, I work with this this provider all the time that always, they always do my bar service and they provide bartenders. And sometimes it is like a straight referral, but sometimes you say, I planner referred you and you got this business. Therefore, I planner now get 10% of what you made or a certain, like a finder's fee. And I'm not saying I'm against finder's fees. I know that is, again, another revenue stream for people. And it makes sense. Our whole rising tide community or competition idea, like that's great if you can make money while other people are making money. But I think just being clear on that, like, in social media, how they make you say, hey, this is a sponsored post versus you being like, I love a product. I would like that just to be a little bit more open, out in the open. Because that's like when I source AV vendors, I don't do referral fees. I don't get a kickback from these companies that I'm working with. And so I try to present to clients both the budget side of things of like, yep, here's the numbers, but also having met with the people, or if I've worked with them before, giving anecdotal reasoning why, hey, maybe this one's better than that one, or this one told me their stuff's in-house versus external. So like if we need an extra piece of equipment, it's probably going to be more expensive with this company. But yeah, I think that's where my frustration kicks in. If I know certain people always pick them, maybe because they're good, but also I'm like, but if you're getting a kickback in the back end, you don't have to say how much, but I think just knowing like, hey, we have a referral agreement or something would just help everybody understand, why you might be picking one over the other.
The referral fee comment is so important. I wasn't even thinking that, but absolutely. That's like a huge thing that happens all the time. So I love what you said. Yeah. All right. So next dilemma, how do you handle discovering a speaker or performer is problematic in their behavior or background after they've been booked? Ouch.
Darn. This one, I thought about this And again, I will unfortunately say that I get often put in an executor role, which means I can help advise, I can provide guidance, but at the end of the day, I am usually not the yes or no decision maker on talent. And some projects I work on, I guess I can. So, like, hearing this, I think I would want to make sure that I was read in and understood all of the problematic background. And then I would need to figure out who on my team is a need to know of being aware of what that is. Because often, again, I guess I'm coming at it from the stance of they're problematic, and unfortunately, we have to keep working with them. I have not been able or been a part of, I think, this is so bad. I feel like, Mary, we forget some of our horror stories of, like, I don't think I've been a part of an event where we've fired a speaker that we booked at some point and then fired. I think it's more been in the searching process, or even talent. I'll say, like, some of my sporting events I do, we have on air, on camera talent. But I also will say I've worked with clients, or I've worked to make my types of events and the people I work with. I've really honestly weaned out events that involved problematic people, not just speakers, but like organizers, hosts, just people in general who had what I would say is maybe inappropriate behavior. I had an event that I learned about that, and I was done after that. I finished the event, did what I need to do, but moving forward, not interested. Again, I said someone else will do this event, but I don't want to put myself or anyone I'm working with in that position to deal with that. So yeah, I think it would be more just, I want to know all of that transparency of what's going on, and then who on my team would need to know and be aware as well, and come up with a plan, especially if that behavior is inappropriate or something that would impact staff, of like, okay, if we have to move forward with this person and something happens, we talk about backup plans, like, who am I going to? How do we shut this down? How do we, make sure this doesn't impact the whole event? But yes, it is it's such a dilemma. Mary, what about you?
I mean, at the end of the day, unfortunately, because in events we work with so many different people and personalities, we are going to work with problematic people. It will happen. Maybe every single event. I don't know, like, to some extent. Obviously, some are worse than others. I think I've definitely worked with people who may be a little needy, or they have, just really specific requests. And that's, to me, I'm like, that's fine. It's whatever. But it's when we're talking about what problems, it's like what you said, Logan, if it becomes like inappropriate behavior, I think that is an ethical dilemma. If I think the problem is that many of the events that we do, kind of no matter what the industry is, they're results driven. And so if that person is a problem, but they still bring results, then I see people keep working with those people years after years after years. And then what you do is you learn how to work with them, and you can at least anticipate the problem that they're going to be and how to work with it. But I just see that happen so much, and it's sort of annoying, because I'm like, don't we all just want to work with nice people? But not everybody cares about that. Some people just care about the results. And so, yeah, it's challenging.
Yeah, it wouldn't be on this episode if it wasn't a challenging topic. So I'm intrigued by your answer, Mary, and agree with a lot of what you're saying. So our last tier of the dilemmas is, how should planners respond if safety protocols on site are skipped to save either time or money?
I don't know, like, the exact phrasing, but I heard this somewhere, and I believe it's true. So if you know what I'm talking about, let me know. But I think under each area of work that somebody has, like, they have their responsibilities, and there's a certain level of, like, due diligence that you have. So, like, when we do events, we a lot of times in one way or another are responsible for these guests that are coming to this event. They're placing kind of like their safety in our hands. Probably you could say in partnership with like the venue or in the client, if that's the case. Like, yes, there are multiple parties with responsibilities, but including us, we are kind of in charge, of that safety plan under the area that we're in charge of. So how do we respond if safety protocols are skipped? Well, I think it's our responsibility to respond. I think we need to do our due diligence to make sure that like the vendors are safe, or the staff are safe, and that the guests are safe. And obviously, maybe our experience isn't really like vast when it comes to safety protocols, but I think that we have to do our part to understand the emergency procedures under the things that we're in charge of. So I do think the responsibility lies with us, also other people, but no matter what, I think it does fall on us as well. So if they're skipped to save time or money, or let's say they don't want to do whoever has the end say doesn't want to do anything about it. In our contract, we have like a 3-strike system that says like we're gonna ask if we don't feel safe or something is happening, we're gonna like tell you again. If you don't do anything to address it, then we have the right to leave. And so I like that. It's never happened, but I like kind of having something like that as a backbone to at least keep me and my staff safe. Logan, what about you?
Yeah, I think I have a similar clause in my contract, except I don't think it's 3 strikes. I think it's just if I fear for my physical safety and don't believe that the client is doing anything to, change that, then yes, I can technically walk off the job. Again, I've never had to do it, but I have it in there. Um, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I feel like this question though is so real, and the fact that like things are lines on a Excel spreadsheet, and it's easier to be like, why don't we just cut that? We don't need 10 security guards, cut it down to 2. And so, yeah, I think it is our job to educate the client as much as we can when any financial or resource cutting of safety impacts what we do. Is just like important for us to know. And then, yeah, documenting anything, like just putting stuff in writing if you don't agree with necessarily how things are being approached, is so important. And then just make sure you have insurance and know kind of where liability lies. Like I, as an individual, LLC single member person, I have liability insurance. I have, I think, 2 different kinds of insurance because I had one agency needed me to have 2 different kinds, which I can't remember now. If I think I have general liability and then another second kind as well. But I would just encourage everyone, unless you work full time for a company and you fall under their insurance policy, just making sure you're aware of kind of what that is, because we know live events happen. And then I just, again, treat everybody like humans. So like some of my sporting events I work where I know there's going to be overnight security, but I personally have not seen them or witnessed it. I will, like, to my DJs, like anecdotally be like, if I were you, I personally would not leave any of my equipment here overnight. I am taking everything with me personally that I'm working with, apart from stuff, tape or a stapler, something I don't mind if I come back tomorrow and it's disappeared. So some of that too, of just being aware of the plan, and then try to treat your staff or people who report to you as humans, because they're not going to be as well versed in the plan, of just not over promising, if that is something that wasn't necessarily like a priority. All right, so now getting into real life scenarios. Mary, just getting your reaction. Again, we're thinking about it's from the ethics side of things. But scenario number 1, you've got teenagers who are volunteers at your event and they are staffing event registration, or like check in and check out. How do we feel about that?
How do we feel about that? This is not uncommon, I think is what I'll say, but um I think it's okay to like to an extent. Like I think you get the volunteers that you need to work the registration at the event. Of course, there's more questions like is it a 21 and over event? Then obviously maybe they can't be there. But if it's just kind of like a normal event and they can be there, I think it's fine. Um but I think it depends what role that they are doing. Um, I think I won't go into it because honestly, I'm not an expert. I think we need to have some level of understanding of PCI compliance. And so just like looking at that and who can like handle the credit cards and how is that data stored as part of that process. And sometimes I wonder, I don't know the answer to this. Sometimes I wonder if like teenage volunteers who have never interacted with the organization before, if that's like a safe situation. And so sometimes I don't love that and it makes me feel uncomfortable. So I think that's where this one probably came from. Logan, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think if I came on site and that was the situation, I would just make sure you have an adult. I always have that you really need a paid adult, a paid staffer at your event. And I think regardless, when you do volunteers, and I don't know, Mary, how much you see this, but the few events I do where I manage volunteers at an event, they all have to sign like an NDA and another waiver of some form that I can't remember what it, like kind of like I think a release of liability kind of thing. But an NDA is the big one, because yes, we don't necessarily see credit cards. That would be another option, would be like some of my events, any credit card or money being exchanged has to go through like just me or whoever the lead person is. And the other volunteers are just doing kind of names. And so that's where that NDA would cover that. So yes, I think that's how I would react. But it's a good question to add to your list if you are managing volunteers, to know, what are the ages of these volunteers?
Exactly. All right, our next scenario, Logan, a VIP guest insists on bypassing security and check-in. What do you do?
Ooh, this one's a fun one. Anytime you've had to work anything VIP, this is, it's so person dependent and so event dependent. And ideally this happens after I've already talked through it with the client before the event day of like, what do we do if certain people, because usually going through this scenario, I will get a list, like an unofficial list of like, oh, these 10 people, yeah, let's just get them in there. And if you have to go up and hand them their name badge later, like, do not stop them. They need to go in. And then if anyone's not on that list, that then gives me the authority to say, I understand you want to, be stopped. I can have you come over and just talk to me if that feels more VIP for you. And somebody who's not on the list, that is, again, you're getting sent to, I love my trouble table concept of having somebody who is your person to deal with anyone who is not in the system, not behaving, not doing the standard process. Just sending them over is so helps streamline and allow you to, help out as many of the attendees that are doing the process correctly. And then those that are complicated have to wait. So, yeah, I would say you need to make sure ahead of time. If we didn't have that process, I still am usually very comfortable holding somebody up and later on can look at the client and say, you didn't want me letting people in off the street. So, that's why we had them wait. I try to be extra nice to them, get them a water, again, try to be as transparent about what you have to do so they know it's not you just wasting their time. It's I have to get a hold of this person. They're going to be able to, and even if it's just saying I have to get a hold of my manager and they have to approve this, can help. But yeah, you just want to make sure. I think my always fear is I always go on I'm more conservative of stopping people rather than letting them in, since if I don't recognize them or know who they are or haven't talked about it ahead of time, I'm very hesitant to just let someone in. Mary, how would you react to that scenario?
Honestly, I agree with everything you said. There's not really much that I can add except just like double tapping on our job is customer service. So making sure that people, you just address it and you make them feel important, even if they're not, or if they are important, you make them feel important. But it's everything you said, Logan. Honestly, if you have to stop that person because they weren't on your list before the event, that's not like the client should have given you that information beforehand. So you're just like, you can't do it. It's that situation where if you let one person come through, then somebody else is going to want to come through too. And so you gotta make some rules around that. So a lot of people think that they're important. Who's actually on the list is the question.
All right, Mary, next scenario is the client asks you to cut accessibility accommodations from the budget to save on costs. What would you do?
My hope is actually though to get ahead of this, I will say. So we have like a conversation with clients about like the pillars of their events and what do they actually find important. I think we can all say, yes, we think accessibility is important, sustainability, equity. Like we think all these things are important as part of events, but the reality is what are our clients actually going to invest in? That's the question. And so if you can have that conversation at the beginning, I think that helps the situation not happen. But let's say they say accessibility is important, and then all of a sudden they're like, somebody requests like cart services and they need some type of captioning or something. And then it ends up being expensive. You didn't budget for it. And then the client says, well, we're not going to do it. Then what do you do? Right. So this happened with an event. We had a couple people who needed these accommodations and we were not expecting it. And it did add about, I don't know, $1,000 or $1,500 more than we were planning on. But we decided at the beginning that accessibility was important. So it didn't matter. We were going to do it. And we were in the negative in that area, but it was important. And so if they ask you to cut it, I would say it's our responsibility to remind them of their goals and the things that we discussed before and say, this is something that we agreed was important. It's something we asked people to share. And so they have shared. And so I would push back. I would push back on this personally. But I think that's partly because I also think it's important. But at the end of the day, though, it is their budget. So I think that they could choose to cut it and we got to cut it. But I would advocate. Logan, what would you add?
Yeah, I agree. I think, yeah, you can advocate for it. I think, again, I would just document. I'm a big fan of documenting, especially if you're cutting things that maybe you don't personally agree with. But at the end of the day, unless you are the event host, and this is something that you then have to answer for, you're going to, it's their budget. Like you said, Mary, it's their budget. It's their choice. But I just always would make sure you just have stuff documented. Again, maybe even saying, hey, getting it now would have been $400. So then later on, when you're going back to look and be like, oh my gosh, we spent $1,500. It could have been $400. That I think is, again, just really, really important. And unfortunately, I don't see every event host hitting every accessibility mark. And that's, again, because it's often like the dollars add up. And unfortunately, for what a lot of events value, it is sometimes more of the bigger impact, the things that are going to make are going to be accessible to everyone versus helping accommodate one person. And I don't agree with it. I don't think it's right, but I know tough decisions get made with budgets. And there are some events out there that are, pushing that envelope on making accessibility just so accessible. Everything is getting touched on, and that's great. I just don't see it universally. So I think most of my clients are doing that smaller approach, like you said, Mary, of like asking what people need. And then only once they have that person requesting that form of accessibility, do they then accommodate it. And that, again, is fine because then you're not doing stuff that you don't need, but it also does lead to last minute costs. So just a tough one.
All right. So our next scenario, Logan, you are working with a client whose values don't align with yours, but their budget is huge. What do you do?
Oh,
So tempting.
interesting. I feel like I've talked about this already a little today, but yeah, this is so tough. And I know, Mary, like I thought about this because we've been talking about getting more sponsors with the podcast, and we worked with somebody who helped with sponsorship a number of years ago, and they had a funny way of like how they wanted to gauge who we wanted to work with. And it was like, with willing to sell your soul was one of the options of like, for sure, we definitely want to work with these people. And then there's down to like, no way, does not matter, however much money they would ever give us, we are not interested. And that is something that I don't think I had thought about client wise. And so for me, it has been very trial and error, I found. So for me, working with right now, current Logan answering this question, if I had somebody who didn't align with my values, but had a huge budget, I would say, thank you so much. I'm happy to ask around in my network if there's anybody else who might be a good fit. But it would be a very nice no thank you. Just because, again, I found I'm really trying to hone in on working with people that I enjoy. And I know that that is not everybody, and that is not every event, and that's not every event client. I have had a couple of these situations where I haven't figured out that part of values not aligning. And sometimes the budgets were big. Sometimes the budgets were just kind of mid-range. But it was something that I factored in afterward. And that is something I do every year on my retreat is I do a gut reaction in my post-event notes of like, hey, next year, what would I need differently? Do I need more money? Do I need less work, different role, whatever it is? But then at the end of every year, I do think back once I've had some space for my events and just gut check myself of, would I do this again? And I think anytime my values haven't aligned, I've just really not enjoyed the event. And only if I was truly hurting and there was no other events coming down the pipeline, which really goes against one of my ideas that there's enough events for everyone, would I say that, I would be willing to do that. Mary, how about you? Client doesn't align with you, but has a big budget.
Yeah, I'm willing to sell my soul for most people. I think I have to say that. And here's the thing. I was just talking yesterday actually about, I was like, when is the time going to come that everybody told me would come when I started my business? They said, there's going to come the day when you can decide who your clients are. And I'm like, you can pick and choose. And I'm like, it's been 5 years and that day hasn't come because I am in the hustle mode still. I'm trying to grow. And the way to grow is to get more business. And so, I haven't come to that point where I'm really willing to say no. And I haven't also had any, like, honestly, like that list we listed, Logan, where it's like willing to sell our soul or absolutely not. I haven't had any absolutely nots. I've had some that maybe I'm like, I don't really know, but yeah, let's do it. And I think that's a personal choice. So I think like I am choosing to take the business in that direction and say yes to all of these things. And that's why I haven't had the opportunity to say no, because I choose to keep saying yes. And so with that in mind, I want to like represent that perspective of maybe those of us who are like hustling and just saying yes to all the things. And so with that, I agree with everything that you said. If the values don't align to a certain extent, then you have to make that call. And do you make the call for yourself, for your business, for your team? That's a tricky question. Like, yeah, I don't know. I don't really know the answer to that one.
I mean, I think we should just highlight this is a moment where we kind of disagree.
Yeah.
And that's okay because we have different, again, and listeners, if you haven't gone back, please go back and listen to our episode that's all about growth as businesses. Because I mean, I think I challenge you, Mary, where I'm also growing, but just in a different way. And it is, you need the financial growth with the team growth kind of thing. So, yeah, I think there's both sides to it. So again, no judgment if you are someone who has taken that big paycheck and worked with that client who doesn't align with your values, because again, everybody's different. But as we wrap this discussion up, Mary, how do we create a culture where ethical decisions are the norm and not the exception?
I think it takes time. And I think we see some of these shifts though that help this. And one of those things I think is just integrating ethics into the event process. And that's happening. We just talked about how we talk more now about accessibility and all of that. And so I think having these conversations as part of the process will help us approach those situations and proactively be able to prepare so that we know ahead of time what our answers are going to be when these situations come up. So I think that's what we can do more of for sure. Logan, what would you add to that?
Yeah, I agree. I think having those discussions, and if it's a reframe of maybe if ethics makes people's hair stand up and be like, whoa, 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 our legal team has to get involved. Yeah, maybe coming back to the values or even just your why. What is your event goal and how does this play into that goal? And then I would even go just really small minutia of like, yeah, you've cut this. Okay, what are we, how does this impact the staff? How does this impact the individual attendee as they're trying to get in, and going through, I mean, we had some real life scenarios that we talked, so you're welcome to use any of those as examples when you're trying to talk through it. But I think having the discussions is the important part. Talking through the scenarios and the what ifs is the important part to make sure you're prepared. And hopefully if you're not doing that already, you've added that to your list, just as you're going along to kind of talk through what potential scenarios might come up.
I love it. This was a hearty conversation today, I would say. So, yeah, lots of good stuff coming out. And thank you everybody for joining us on this ethics journey today. Before we end our episode, we have Logan who has our bonus tip.
Yes. My bonus tip is all about a question you should add to your post-event process. This is just to ask yourself, what is one thing you could have streamlined or saved time on? We love saving time and being more efficient in the event industry. And so I had this come up for an event where I made host cards. They are the cards my hosts would hold in their hand as they talk on screen. And I worked really hard to make sure they had them for the rehearsal day, the day before the event, only then to have to redo over half of them overnight between the rehearsal day and the event day. And when I looked back, I went, they could have just dealt with my printed out script on regular 8.5 by 11 paper for the rehearsal day. And then I would have just had to make one set of cards versus having to go back and replace certain ones. So that is something that is going to save me some time and some hassle next year. So I just challenge you, what is one thing you could have saved time on or streamlined at your last event?
Awesome. Great bonus tip today. And thank you, everybody, for listening to this episode of the Better Events Podcast. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Better Events Pod. You can email us at bettereventspod@gmail.com. Join us again for the 2025 Better Events Conference by visiting bettereventspod.com/conference. You can also connect with Logan and I directly on LinkedIn. We love to hear from you. Just let us know you heard about us from the podcast. And if you want more Better Events content, you can also join our private community on Substack. It's growing and we would love to see you there. And thank you again for listening to another episode. We will be back with you again next Wednesday.